Hey, it's your girl Liz coming at you with 5 tips for Zoom etiquette. Please don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll never miss a thing. I'm here for you every Tuesday. Let's get it. Tip number 1. During the semester, you're probably going to have to see your counselor. So here are some tips that you can use to have a successful session with your counselor. So the very first tip is have your ID and everything that you need with you when you are going to go on a Zoom with your counselor. If you're going to go on a Zoom with your counselor, you're going to need your ID, you're going to need your game plan, you're going to need your roadmap, you're going to need all that information. Make sure that you gather all the information that you need so that then you can have a more smoother appointment. What happens is that sometimes we forget the questions that we wanted to ask. We forget where our ID number is, we forget where things are located. So it takes longer for us to get through what we need to do with our counselors. I'm sure our counselors would also appreciate this tip because I'm sure they have a lot of different students that are like, oh, but I forgot this, but I forgot that. Or they spend 5 minutes just not doing anything with their student. You have to understand that your counselors right now are bombarded by Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. So if you make it as easy as possible for them, it's easier for them to help you and they'll love and want to help you. They'll probably appreciate you for having everything ready for your session with them. Another great tip is for you to write down the questions that you have for your counselor on a piece of paper. What happens most times to me is that I forget what I wanted to ask. For me, it's so much easier to just write down my questions when I think of them rather than trying to come up with them when I'm with my counselor. So make sure that you have your ID ready and any questions that you have prior to your counselor's appointment. Tip number 2. Unless you need to ask a question, I would say please make sure that you are on mute most of the time. The reason why I'm saying this is there's always background noise in the Zoom call, no matter what. So if you put yourself on mute, it'll help the rest of the class focus on the actual message of the professor. And you never know when somebody's going to ask you something or say something while you're on Zoom. And you don't want it to be something that's embarrassing or inappropriate. Not to mention your professor's not going to really like that you're kind of being a distraction while he's doing his lecture or she's doing her lecture. All of that is distracting to the professor and to the rest of the class. So if you could put yourself on mute for most of your session, that would be the most appropriate just because it would be less distracting and you would be helping out your peers. Tip number 3. If you're like me and you forget your questions if you wait too long, because that happens to me a lot, this one is gonna be your favorite. If you're like me and you forget questions, then write them on the chat because most likely another person's gonna have that same question. And so if you write it on the chat, at least your professor will know that you have a question, and when they have a chance, they'll be able to answer that question. I know my professor's always like, oh, do you have a question? And I'm like, I did. What was it? What was my question? And I'll completely forget. So if you write it in the chat box, you won't forget. You'll write it when you know it, and then your professor will be able to answer that question for you. So please be encouraged to ask questions during Zoom chat. I know that there are some people that are shy, but this is the best way for you to kind of be brave and ask that question. Just use the chat box. Even when we do go back to normal, I always write my questions down on my notepad. If you're like me, these are great tips for you not to forget the questions that are so important when your professor's right in front of you. This tip helped me during normal class time, but it can also help you during your Zoom sessions with your professor. Tip number 4. This tip depends on how your professor wants to run his class. Some professors are going to be okay with you asking questions during lecture. Some are going to be a little more strict and they're going to ask you to use the chat box. Depending on what your professor requires or prefers, do that. But what I like to do when I'm in a Zoom meeting and I need to ask a question, I usually unmute myself and wait until there's an appropriate pause where I can ask my question. It also helps me be the first to ask a question because I'm already unmuted. So this is a great tip for you when you actually want to ask your question, not on the chat box, but verbally. But if your professor has a certain way of doing things, then do that instead. It's always good to follow the professor's instructions because there's a certain way that each professor wants to run their class. And it's their prerogative. Tip number 5. I know some of y'all have 8 a.m. classes. Don't be showing up to your 8 a.m. Zoom with your PJs. Don't do it to me. Don't do it to me. As we're going through our educational experience, it's extremely okay to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. One of the biggest things is for you to get used to being in the mindset of being a professional. When you're attending your Zoom sessions this semester, try wearing a business casual shirt. Nobody knows you're wearing your PJs on the bottom. You don't know I'm wearing yoga pants on the bottom. Shh. Nobody needs to know. But at least you look professional and you're ready for class. Sometimes this creates a great impression on your professors and your colleagues and people that you work with. We don't know how long this pandemic is gonna last, and so just having that mindset of being a professional, of showing up in a professional manner, speaking in a professional manner, we're all in training here. So if you take this as an opportunity for you to learn these skills, then when it's time for you to show up, you're gonna show up. Some professors' first impressions mean everything. I've had so many interviews over Zoom in the past couple months that this tip really has worked for me. Now for every Zoom, I make sure that I have my nice shirt on. Every Zoom, I make sure that I have my pen and pencil, that I'm ready for class. Bonus, 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 bonus. Woo. You can get ahead of the game, create a group chat that will allow you to connect with all the other students in your class. This is a great tip because everything is online right now. And if you can have a support group in which you can lean on when you have a question, when you're not feeling like, you're gonna make it. Because, sometimes a girl feels like she ain't finna make it. So this is what I do to make sure that I always have a support group in every class, so that when I feel like, yo, this is hard, then I could have somebody to talk to about it. And the people in your class are the perfect people to talk to about it. So if you already have a group chat set up, put that link in the chat box and tell people, hey, I have a chat already ready if y'all want to join. That way we can create a study group and pass this class together. So there's still ways for you to connect with others in your class. You just have to be a little bit more creative about it. Just because Rona's having a party right now doesn't mean that we can't connect as people. So this is a great tip, and probably the most important one if you ask me. Connect with the people in your class. You know I've said it before and I'll say it again. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Hey. This is Liz signing off.
Amazing. Pink